Hi, it's Dwyer. It is February 24th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, just a little side commentary here. Reid got let go by CNN, right? And as you can imagine, a lot of people are talking about it. It's in the news. The media is an interesting community. They're really not that supportive of each other. Some hard things have been said about Reid from numerous media pundits, right? Let me just point out that you go through people's pasts and you'll see situations where Steve Jobs got forced out of Apple, a company he founded, right? And Jobs, of course, had to take the long way back, being an entrepreneur, having other companies. Then, of course, being invited back to Apple after he showed an ability to succeed elsewhere, right? Mark Cuban got fired from the place he was working. He was able to give some customers a break. He told the customers, look, I need for you to work with me on this because Cuban himself could not afford his business expenses. Now, of course, Mark Cuban is a billionaire. I'm a free market type, right? Reid does not resonate with me. But this might actually be an opportunity for her, right? As Bob Marley, who I named my daughter after, famously said, when one door is closed, another is open. Reid has a fan base, right? They want to hear from her. What Reid needs to think about is what Mark Cuban thought about years ago, right? Do I want another job? Or do I want my own business? We're in a world where anyone, let me raise my hand, can start making videos here online and can actually communicate with like-minded souls, right? Bottom line is Reid has market value. If I'm Reid, before I accept my next job, I would have to seriously ask myself the question of whether I want a job or a business, right? Reid has some controversial views. Let's just say she can be controversial if she owns the platform she's on, right? Food for thought. Let's get back to boxing here. Made a video yesterday, many of you, and it surprised me, right? In fact, 2 days ago, I made a video where I talked about how, I had Hamza Shiraz winning his fight against Carlos Adames, right? Now, I believe this is a big subject, in part because, of course, the middleweight division right now is rough and tumble. The rumor is that Shiraz is having problems making weight, so he might have to move up to 168. I think Shiraz is a major talent. I think he's unique in the sport. I think he has one of the sport's best jabs. I think he's going to have a lot of success, and if you're a gambler and you spot him, you can have a lot of success backing him in the betting market in future fights. But there's another group, and it includes a judge who had Adames winning the fight 118 to 110, as well as many boxing fans who were outraged at the draw. In other words, even though Adames kept his title, right, folks? He was the champ entering the ring. He was the champ leaving the ring. People are outraged because they want integrity in the sport. And they didn't think Shiraz did enough to get a draw. It's even worse than that. Adames closes strong. People are particularly outraged because they realized that if Adames didn't close strong, he would have lost his title, given the judges' scorecards, right? One judge has Shiraz winning by a round. Another judge has a draw, right? The judge who had it a draw, if Shiraz had closed a little bit better, right, would have, had Shiraz winning the fight. It's even more intriguing. It's actually a storyline worth watching because Shiraz's promoter is one of the biggest names in boxing, Frank Warren. And Frank Warren tries to be a straight shooter with the press. So Frank Warren, believe it or not, has actually said he understands the judges' scorecards. In other words, Warren isn't just there saying, hey, my guy was robbed. My guy should be the champion. He's actually more nuanced. He's blaming an injury Shiraz is supposed to have had with a hand. He's also saying that the scoring was fair. Right? Let me just point out, in other sports, I'm a baseball fan, right? In other sports, you understand that there are different cultures, right? You have fastball pitchers. You also have breaking ball pitchers, right? The bottom line, though, is the pitch is called either a strike or a ball, right? We understand that the different approaches still get, counted a certain way. You don't have that assurance in boxing. In boxing, we're literally watching different sports, right? So what I want the Carlos Adames crowd to consider is that one of the best boxing sites on the net, Bad Left Hook Boxing, had one of their people scoring the fight live online. Right? This is as the fight happened. You don't even have to go back to the telecast where I've pointed out on the live telecast after the fourth round. The guys announcing the fight, the British press, said that Shiraz was ahead. Right? It was all working for Shiraz at the end of the fourth round. Right? Ahead meant either 3-1 or 4-0. Right? Just understand that. Forget the live telecast. Bad Left Boxing's live score had Shiraz winning the fight by 4 rounds. Right? I'm just telling you, Shiraz's jab was an ongoing problem for Carlos Adames. Now, I hear the Adames side of the ledger, right? He's the champ. The fact that we're here talking about it, the fact that the views on the fight are so wide, one judge having Adames win by 8 rounds, right, should tell us that as the champ entering the fight, Adames deserved to leave the ring with his belt, which he did. Right? But I do need for people to look at that fight and just understand there's a different point of view. Right? I'm not saying Shiraz was at his best, but what I am saying is Shiraz's power hand is his left hand. He is a southpaw, and he's landing the jab with regularity to the point where he, just by jab counts, lands a couple dozen more jabs over the fight than Carlos Adames. I also believe that Adames starts going low late in the fight out of desperation. He felt he needed to change the dynamic in the fight. Right? Let's shift gears. Let's talk Martin Bakole. Now, this is going to be a loaded topic. What I want people to do, in my favorites folder, I actually have a little video on Oscar Bonavena, Right now, I need for folks to understand that at a time when Joe Frazier, Olympic gold medalist, was unbeaten and was young, 1966 or so, right? Joe Frazier fought Oscar Bonavena. Now, understand, Bonavena was a huckleberry type guy, right? He, just like Martin Bakole is, a guy who, ruffles a lot of feathers, we'll say, right? Breaks boxing protocol by talking about sparring sessions. Oscar Bonavena was a guy who, we'll just say, talked a lot of trash back in the 60s. His nickname was Ringo because the press thought his hairstyle looked like Ringo Starr's. I'm not kidding. He fights Joe Frazier, one of the most ferocious fighters I've ever seen. Right? A guy whose nickname was Smoking. And you understood he earned it. Right? Bonavena knocks down a young Joe Frazier twice. Not once, twice in the match. Now, smart gamblers would understand that, even though that's a setback, Frazier goes on to win the fight not by stoppage, by split decision. Right? I'm telling you, great fighters have that fight in their background where you say, wow, did he really win that fight? Right? Well, just understand, if you continue to support Joe Frazier after he gets dropped twice by Oscar Bonavena, Joe Frazier would go on to win the heavyweight championship, right? And would not lose again until he fights George Foreman in Jamaica. By the way, Foreman, of course, another Olympic gold medalist. Foreman won the gold medal in the '68 Olympics, right? Well, let me just say, let's talk about another guy, right? Max Schmeling is fighting a guy who is supposed to be the future. And what does Schmeling do? He KOs him early. Stops him early in his home country. Schmeling crosses the Atlantic to beat this guy. It's a stoppage. The guy he beat was young Joe Louis. That's Louis's first loss. Now, if at that point you said, you know what? Louis is still one of the biggest punchers in the heavyweight division. Right? Louis made a mistake against Schmeling, but I still believe in Joe Louis. Folks, you would have gone on a run if all you did was pick Joe Louis in fights after that. Louis doesn't lose again for over a decade. He's still the longest reigning heavyweight champ in history. Right? He gets a rematch later with Max Schmeling. You know what happens. Right? Louis predicts the knockout. Louis gets the knockout. It's in something like the first round. So let's talk about Martin Bakole. Bakole's still dangerous. Right? I'm not going to blame the fact that he took the fight on short notice. Quite frankly, and I know this is counterintuitive to a lot of people, it's a great decision. Number one, Bakole wasn't an unbeaten fighter anyway, right? He had lost to Michael Hunter. I assume Bakole got handsomely paid for being a last-minute replacement. Right, folks? The money is in his account. Right? This is professional prize fighting. The money matters. Right? Understand, too, Bakole had sparred with Joseph Parker. Just Google his comments on sparring sessions with Joseph Parker. This was his opportunity on one of the bigger boxing cards ever. How many champs were there on this boxing card? How many divisions? Right? We're here talking about the middleweight championship fight involving champion Carlos Adames. Right? You had Bivol Beterbiev on this card. You had Buatsi against Callum Smith on this card. Right? You're a fighter. You're hoping for publicity. You're hoping to connect with fans. You want the fans to see you. You get offered a lot of money at the last minute to be on this boxing card. How do you lose? We're here talking about Martin Bakole right now. He's in the news. More fight fans now know of Martin Bakole than they did before this fight. So Bakole, like Joe Louis, gets caught early. Right, folks? Let me just say this. Parker, former heavyweight champion. It's not like Parker's unknown. Right? Parker's a guy who's already fought people like Anthony Joshua, Zhilei Zhang, Deontay Wilder. Right? Parker is known. Dillian White. Right? Parker's been world class for years. He's well connected. Andy Lee is his trainer, for crying out loud. Let me just say, the same reasons why many people believe that Bakole has a very bright future in the heavyweight division, and I'm one of them. Right? I'm not using the phrase many people to talk about other people. I'm talking about myself too. Is because Bakole has the power, has the intelligence, right? Has the size, has the unique skill set, the ability to be a long-range hooker in my eyes, right? To destabilize a lot of people. He still has all of those things going for him. Now, in this fight, he gets Joe Parker to open up. Right now, Parker's a vet. Understand the thought process on the Parker side of the aisle. Right? Parker's a vet. He knows it's the closing seconds of the round. So Parker understood, if I lead with a big right hand, and if Bakole counters me and hurts me, I don't have to survive for 2.5 minutes. I just have to survive for the last few seconds of the round. So Parker takes a huge risk. He leads with a hellacious, big right hand, and he throws it high. Right? He doesn't even throw it below Bakole's eyes. Think about Bakole's eye level and down. No, he throws it above Bakole's eyes. Huge punch. Right? Parker's all in. He doesn't have a hand up or anything like that. Understand, if Bakole takes a step back, if Bakole sees the punch coming, Parker is naked after throwing that punch. Right? Parker tries to hit a home run in the closing seconds of the round. And he does. Where does that punch land on Bakole? Right, folks? It looks like it nicks the top of his head, doesn't it? Think about how tall Martin Bakole is. That's how high Parker throws the punch. So Bakole's unprepared. He doesn't see the punch coming. Right? Closing seconds of the round. Who thinks Parker's going to come over and throw some big high punch? Right? So Bakole gets dropped and he's badly hurt. Understand, these punches that cause neurological responses where your legs say, no, player, we're not cooperating. Right? Your legs actually do a chicken dance before you hit the canvas. Bakole's badly hurt. You know, it's not a flash knockdown. This is a knockdown where Bakole's legs stop cooperating with him. Now, let me just say, if Bakole could change one thing, besides blocking the shot or taking a step back, it would be his reaction to the knockdown. Right? When you're on the canvas, folks, the most powerful man in the ring is the referee. The referee can wave off the fight. The referee can stop the fight. You have to convince the referee that you can continue. Bakole makes a mistake. Look where he's facing. You get knocked down. Understand, it's the closing seconds of the round. All Bakole has to do is get up and nod and say, I'm good. That's all he has to say. Right? I'm good. The ref says, you want to continue? Yes. Right? That's all he has to say. Bakole looks away from the ref. Right? Why? Number one, I believe he's dazed and confused. He's just been hit with a haymaker. That's what he got hit with. He's dazed and confused. Number two, this is unfamiliar territory for him. Bakole's a hunter. He's not the hunted. He's getting off the canvas. He doesn't know what's going on. The guy from his corner is nearby. Bakole gets distracted. Bakole looks at the guy. Bakole's doing everything wrong, right? He has his hand on the top rope. If you're trying to convince the referee that you could continue, you don't want to look like you need to hold on to the top rope to continue standing. So Bakole makes a series of mistakes. What does it mean for his next fight? Not a damn thing. Right? Let me point out that Bakole wanted Parker opening up. Parker opens up. Parker wins the fight. I'm not saying Parker didn't get the knockdown. I'm not saying Parker didn't deserve the victory. Right? He got the stoppage. Knockouts count. Right? But what I am saying is, had Bakole survived that exchange, he would have had the time between rounds to recover. Right? He could have been in survival mode for a round, then made his way back into the fight against a fighter who got stopped by Joe Joyce. Against a fighter who's a risk taker. That Joe Joyce fight, look at the overhand rights Parker throws in that fight. Folks, Parker's a gambler. That's exactly the dynamic Bakole wanted. He was fighting a guy who was about to fight a reigning heavyweight champion. Right? All eyes were on this fight. Had Bakole beaten Parker, Bakole would have had a convincing argument that he was ready to fight a heavyweight champion. So to me, I see this as a loss. I'm not here to try to make a loss look like a win, although it is a win for Bakole financially. Understand, this is prize fighting. Money's involved, right? Do you really lose when you've gotten, in a matter of days, a few $1 million? Right? Also, let me say this too. Bakole's blown out early. Right? If I were a fighter, and if I was going to get knocked out, I'd rather it be early than in the 12th round. It's like, hey, player, if you're going to take me out of my misery, please do it early. I don't want 12 rounds of punishment. Right? Understand. If you're a gambler, this is Christmas. I know it's counterintuitive. Bakole's still dangerous. Styles make fights. A big man on his front foot being aggressive against a familiar opponent, even if that familiar opponent is reigning heavyweight champion Alexander Usyk or reigning heavyweight champion Daniel Dubois. Bakole sparred with both of them, folks. Right? Bakole's still going to be dangerous. There's a group in the sports book right now that sees him knocked out early by Joe Parker, and they're thinking linearly. Right? They're not thinking about Joe Parker's style, Joe Parker's risk-taking, the punch being unconventional, hitting Bakole above his eyes. Think about that. Right? Bakole not being able to convince a ref in the second round that he should be allowed to continue. Right? They're not thinking about how bizarre these events are. They're thinking in terms of, oh, gee, Bakole didn't beat Joe Parker, as if Bakole could never beat Joe Parker. Right? Bakole got dropped in the second round, as if he didn't get dropped off a haymaker, a big punch. Right? And they're saying Bakole must be no good. So what does that mean? Let's say Bakole was going to be a plus 150 against a frontline opponent in his next fight. Right now, you're probably going to get him at a plus 200. Right? Let me say this too. Lawrence Bakole. Now, this is a guy who I feel might be able to beat Martin Bakole. Right? Because Lawrence Bakole, like Hamza Shiraz, has one of the best jabs in the sport. Shiraz is more mobile than Lawrence Bakole. Right? Bakole himself wanted to be a last-minute replacement against Joe Parker. Right? Understand, you get a phone call, they're offering you millions of dollars, you realize, wow, not only am I getting offered millions of dollars on a very high-profile card, but I believe I can beat this guy. Right? I'm telling you, this offer makes itself. I know Jake Paul is out there criticizing Martin Bakole's team. I'll just say this diplomatically. I respect Jake Paul. I think he's better than advertised. He's just dead wrong on this issue. Right? Bakole, I'm sure, just got the biggest payday of his career. Lawrence Bakole was willing to be there. Understand, though, Bakole talked about, and he's one of boxing's best interviews, has been for years. He talked about how Martin Bakole is a big man who does not rely on athleticism. Right? He's a big man getting by in part because of power and bigness. Right? A guy like this isn't going to be severely compromised. I know this is not the way the public sees it, right? The public sees it as a guy who's not even in the country and, was unprepared for the fight. Right? I see it differently. I see it as a case where a guy just got caught. Folks, it happened to Joe Frazier. It happened to Joe Louis. Those are great fighters. It can happen to anybody. Right? A guy just got caught. And, importantly, here's where I really fault Bakole. Didn't know how to look convincing to a referee after he got caught. Right? He should have been, whether or not he knew where he was, he should have looked up and just been programmed to understand when you're looking at a ref, look confident. Answer questions. First, look at the ref. Don't look away. So Bakole is pointing out that Bakole made a great decision in taking the fight because he's not a guy who needs a full training camp to be effective. Right? Let me just say, too, for people looking at styles, Bakole's going to throw a lot of people because of his ability to throw punches from distance, power shots from distance. Bakole has ring coverage. Just understand that Bakole, Lawrence Bakole, has the jab to stay outside against him. Very few do. Right? Very few do. Lawrence Bakole's taller than Joe Parker and fights longer than Joe Parker. Right? I know Bakole knocked out an opponent in one round in his only heavyweight fight. Just understand, Bakole has been in the ring with Moses Atama and countless other heavyweights. Just understand, Bakole has a back foot that would allow him to win slow rounds against Martin Bakole. It would also allow him to have slow rounds against Martin Bakole. Right? Joe Parker won this fight It is what it is. But this fight was heating up. And you understand, as the fight gets more rough and tumble, Martin Bakole's chances of winning are going to increase. So the heavyweight division, I've said this a number of times, folks, this is the deepest I've seen the heavyweight division in quite some time. You have a number of guys, and they include Martin Bakole still, who in my opinion can be champ. Right? Lawrence Bakole can be champ. Right? I myself am wondering what happens since Moses Atama, who I'm hearing could be champ, is a smaller guy who, granted, has fast hands, is a deceptive athlete, but you wonder what happens if he were to fight a Lawrence Bakole, who could keep him outside. Right? That fight would not start until Atama figured out a way to get through Bakole's jab. Right? And those guys have sparred already. So I'll just say congratulations to the Joe Parker crowd on getting the win over Martin Bakole. Right? Just like I still think that Filip Ergovic is the heir apparent, folks, I still think that Martin Bakole is armed and dangerous. Right? Let me also say, too, that I still think that Joseph Parker would have beaten Daniel Dubois. Let me also talk about the real tragedy in all this. Dubois was fighting Parker as a voluntary. Right? Understand, Joseph Parker was not the mandatory. Parker clearly deserves a heavyweight title shot. He's been on one of boxing's best runs. But he's a voluntary. So now the sanctioning body is going to knock on Dubois' door. And they're going to say, player, tell us when you're going to fight our mandatory. That might be Dubois' next fight. Just understand, Dubois is dodging a bullet. Because my assessment is that a KG vet like Joe Parker, who has better feet than Dubois, who has better timing than Dubois, would be a very tough out for Dubois. Right, so missed opportunity here for Martin Bakole. Folks, I'm treating this the way smart gamblers would have treated seeing Joe Frazier knocked down twice in a fight by Oscar Bonavena, right, early in his career. I'm treating this the way fans should have treated Ali getting knocked down by Sonny Banks early in his career. Right? I'm treating this the way smart gamblers should have treated Joe Louis getting stopped by Max Schmeling early in his career. Folks, there are going to be nights where, a good fighter can get caught. Martin Bakole got caught. Right? I'm not making excuses for him. All I'm saying is, don't cross Bakole off your short list of men who could be king. And I'm talking about more than the nickname, the last king of Scotland, one of the sport's absolute best nicknames, in my opinion. Look at the movie. It won Forrest Whitaker Best Actor, the Oscar here in the United States. Let me close by saying this. You heard me mention Oscar Bonavena, right? There's certain guys who make really good bad guys in boxing, right? Boxing has heroes, right? Anthony Joshua in his prime. Even I, a cynic like me, was struck by Joshua winning fights, then in post-fight interviews talking about unity and stuff like that, which is what he did after he beat Joe Parker, right? But you also have bad guys, right? These are the guys who come in the ring, they have a glare, right? This is boxing. Sonny Liston, right? Guys like that, they come in, they have swag. They want you to know that they don't respect the status quo. Now, one of the absolute best bad guys, besides Oscar Bonavena, who's one of the high watermarks in the sport in terms of taunting opponents and stuff like that, he even got under Ali's skin to the point where when Ali fought him, Ali comes back, he fights Oscar Bonavena. Ali knocks him down, then starts imitating Jack Dempsey. Ali does not go to a neutral corner, which is what he should have done. Because, of course, Bonavena had called Ali a kangaroo before the fight, and this was one of those Ali grudge matches. Well, let's name another guy who was a great villain in boxing. He beat Hector Macho Camacho. Understand, the 80s, a little bit different than now, right? Guys would come in, they'd be wearing tassels on their shoes, and they'd be, doing flurries for the crowd before the fight and stuff like that. Not Greg Haugen. Greg Haugen had a Sonny Liston type thing, where he would look at a Hector Macho Camacho and, he would just have open disdain for guys. Greg Haugen had a fight against Julio Cesar Chavez. I mentioned this because Greg Haugen is no longer with us. He died a few days ago from cancer. But I just want today's sports fans to go back to an era when Greg Haugen was about to fight an unbeaten Julio Cesar Chavez. Right now, I know young people look at Chavez and they see an older guy and they have no idea how popular this guy was. Right? Chavez, in my opinion, could have been the president of Mexico. He was that popular. So he's unbeaten. And he signs up to fight Greg Haugen in Mexico. And just understand, Haugen, as only a villain can, right? And understand, we're not talking about some scripted WWE thing. This is real life. Haugen is talking to the press, and he tells the press that Julio Cesar Chavez's record is padded, that Chavez made his record fighting in part Tijuana taxi cab drivers who he thought his mother would have a shot against. Right? Understand what happened. Chavez fans were livid. Right? They were livid. This is one of those fights where Chavez comes out. This is a punishment fight. He drops Haugen early, like first or second round. Then he decides he's going to punish Haugen. In other words, forget the quick knockout. Forget the, I'm taking you out of your misery. No. This is the, you've insulted me, and now I'm going to let you know that I didn't appreciate it. Right? Chavez punishes Haugen, and then, of course, gets the fifth round or so KO. Right? So after the fight, the press came to Haugen, who was actually a good guy playing a role. Right? This is a guy who also fought Ray Mancini when Mancini was popular and stuff like that. And they asked Haugen about his pre-fight, Tijuana taxi cab driver level of opposition comments. And Haugen just said, they must have been some pretty good Tijuana cab drivers. Right? Greg Haugen, one of the absolute best villains I've ever come across, dead in his mid-60s. One of the problems with getting older is that these really well-textured and deep characters who you grew up with start passing. Right? If you're in your 20s, just be prepared for it. I can tell you it's just shocking to me to have grown up and to then realize Michael Jackson no longer with us, Prince no longer with us, Tom Petty no longer with us. You know, in boxing, Greg Haugen no longer with us, right? Nor, by the way, is Oscar Bonavina. Enjoy life while you can. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. What do I think about Martin Bakole in a sentence? He's still a threat. By the way, as is Zhili Zhang. Those are my thoughts. I look forward to yours. Thanks for stopping by.